The world's skyline was suddenly dominated by the dark silhouettes of alien ships, vast and menacing against the daylight. For a brief moment, humanity stood still, some in awe, others paralyzed by fear, unsure of what was happening. General Sarah Williams, watching from the command center of the Pentagon, felt a chill run down her spine as she stared at the massive ships emerging from the clouds. "All units report." She barked into the communication console, her voice sharp despite the rising panic around her. The screens in front of her flickered with chaotic updates from military bases across the globe. Radars offline, defenses shattered, and cities burning. A chilling silence filled the room as reports flooded in. It's true. They're here. The aliens, tall, angular beings encased in metallic armor, descended from their ships with ruthless precision. Their first strike wasn't to invade, but to obliterate. Energy beams ripped through skyscrapers, reducing entire cities to rubble in seconds. In New York, one of the most iconic landmarks, the Statue of Liberty, crumbled to the ground as the Zoraks unleashed their devastating firepower. Sarah's mind raced. She had trained for moments like this, but nothing in her military career had prepared her for such a force. The world's most advanced weapons systems, nuclear and otherwise, were helpless against the Zoraks' advanced technology. It was as if they had been waiting for this moment. An assault so swift and precise, no one stood a chance. General Williams, one of her senior officers, Lieutenant Mark Rayner, said, his voice tight with urgency, "We've lost contact with every military base in the eastern seaboard. They're too powerful. We need a plan, now." Sarah clenched her fists, pushing down the surge of panic threatening to rise. "No, not yet. We fight. We find a way to fight." But how? The Zorak ships were enormous, their firepower far superior to anything Earth had. Even the most powerful tanks and fighter jets had been reduced to scrap metal within minutes of engaging. And yet Sarah could feel something. A spark, deep within. The Zoraks were powerful, but humans had survived countless impossible odds before. This invasion was different, but the fight was far from over. She stood up, looking at the trembling soldiers around her. "Prepare the counteroffensive. I don't care how impossible it seems. Humanity doesn't lie down and die. We survive." Meanwhile, the Zoraks continued their relentless attack, decimating the cities with brutal efficiency. Sarah's heart ached for the millions of lives lost in those first few moments. But as her mind worked through the chaos, an unexpected thought flashed in her mind. What if they're not just invading us? What if they'd been watching us all this time? A cold realization hit her. There was something about Earth, something about humanity that made them a target. And perhaps, just perhaps, that something could be the key to saving them all. The devastation was impossible to ignore. Major cities, once vibrant with life, were now nothing more than smoldering ruins. From the streets of Paris to the heart of London, humanity's landmarks were reduced to rubble. Even the most fortified military bases crumbled under the alien onslaught. The Zoraks were efficient, leaving nothing behind but destruction and fear. The world had never felt smaller, more vulnerable. General Sarah Williams stood at a makeshift command post in the mountains of Colorado. The once pristine landscape, now littered with abandoned vehicles and equipment, was the last semblance of civilization they could rely on. Her team had flowed with only the bare essentials: food, weapons, and a small group of survivors who had managed to escape the chaos. Sarah glanced over at her second-in-command, Lieutenant Rayner. His face was grim, the lines of exhaustion etched deeply into his features. "What's our next move?" he asked, his voice low. There was a familiar tension in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement that they were fighting a war they were losing. She stared at the map in front of her, eyes tracing the alien fleet's path. The Zoraks had established a stronghold near the remains of New York City, their ships hovering above the ruins like predators circling their prey. The military satellites were useless, knocked offline within the first hours of the invasion. They had no way of knowing exactly how many of the alien ships remained or what their next move would be. The odds were staggering, and yet Sarah couldn't allow herself to believe defeat was inevitable. "We can't give up," she said, more to herself than anyone else. "We've been knocked down, but we're still here. Humanity is still here." Raynor studied her for a moment, and then nodded. "We're with you, General. We'll keep fighting." Sarah looked around at the small group of survivors. Engineers, soldiers, civilians, all determined to do whatever they could to fight back. Among them was Dr. Leo Alvarez, a brilliant scientist whose work on human evolution had once seemed far removed from any military application. But now, his theories on human adaptability and survival seemed more relevant than ever. Dr. Alvarez stepped forward, holding a stack of data tablets. His eyes were wide with a mix of excitement and fear. "I've been going through some of the intercepted alien transmissions," he said, his voice trembling. "There's something I didn't expect. It seems the Zoraks didn't just invade us because we're a strategic target. They've been watching us for centuries." "Watching us?" Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. "For what purpose?" Alvarez nodded, clearly nervous. "It's not just that we're rich in resources or a prime target for conquest. They've studied our evolution, our history of survival. They believe that humans, more than any other species, possess a unique adaptability. Something in our genetic makeup makes us unpredictable to them. We're not like any species they've encountered before." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Adaptability. She remembered her military training, how human resilience had always been touted as our greatest asset. She had seen it in soldiers who had survived impossible odds, but she never imagined it could be the very thing the Zoraks feared. "So, they're afraid of us," Raynor muttered, an edge of disbelief in his voice. Dr. Alvarez looked at them both. "In a way, yes. And that means there's hope. We might have a chance, if we can unlock what makes us so unpredictable to them." Hope. The word hung in the air like a fragile thread, but it was the first flicker of light in a world that had gone dark. The following days were a blur of planning and desperation. In the midst of the chaos, Sarah's group, now bolstered by the remnants of various military units and scientists, had set up a temporary base of operations deep within the Colorado mountains. The facility, originally a high-security research lab, now served as their command center. The walls were lined with maps, alien data, and hastily drawn-up battle strategies. Every decision felt like a gamble, every move a leap of faith. But Sarah knew one thing for certain. The Zoraks had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight back, to survive. Dr. Leo Alvarez had become their key asset, his expertise invaluable. He worked tirelessly alongside the best engineers and hackers to decode the alien transmissions and unlock the secrets of Zoraks technology. His revelation about the Zoraks' perception of human adaptability had opened new possibilities, but it also raised more questions. Why had they waited so long to attack? What was it about Earth that had caught their attention now? But answers were in short supply. Instead, the group focused on what they could control, striking back. The first steps were small: sabotaging Zoraks' supply lines, disrupting communication networks, stealing alien technology for reverse engineering. These victories, though minor, brought a sense of purpose and unity to the group. But Sarah knew it wasn't enough. To stand a chance against the Zoraks, they needed a more direct approach. They needed to hit them where it hurt most. It was then that an unexpected visitor arrived. A small group of Zoraks defectors, led by a tall, gaunt figure named Kale, appeared at their doorstep under a flag of truce. Sarah had expected an ambush, a trap, but Kale's team came in peace, or so it seemed. They spoke of growing unrest within the Zoraks' ranks, of a faction that believed humanity's resilience could offer them an advantage against their own enemies. It was a shocking revelation. The Zoraks were not united in their conquest of Earth, and a faction within their ranks was willing to risk everything to see humanity survive. "Why come to us?" Sarah asked, suspicion heavy in her voice as she examined the group of aliens. They were unlike the cold, calculating Zorax soldiers who had ravaged the planet. These were different, slightly gaunt, their eyes weary, their armor worn. Kel's voice was a whisper of a sound. "You don't understand. The Zorax, they've been hunting us too. We were once their allies, but the conquest of Earth has exposed the cracks in their society. We've seen what your species is capable of. The way you fight, the way you adapt, you're different. And now, they are using Earth to fuel their war machine, draining your planet's resources while preparing to destroy everything in their path." A moment of silence passed before Raynor spoke. "And why should we trust you? You're the enemy, after all." Kale lowered his gaze, his eyes reflecting something that Sarah had not seen in the Zorax before: regret. "We don't want to be enemies. We came to warn you. You'll never defeat the Zorax with your current methods. But we can help you. We know their weaknesses, how they operate. We can give you the tools, the strategy, to hit them where it hurts." It was an offer too good to ignore, but the risks were enormous. Trusting aliens, even defectors, seemed like the height of folly. But the urgency of their situation outweighed caution. Sarah stared at the defector leader, weighing the choices. If their intel was genuine, this could be humanity's only shot at survival. "We'll need time to prepare," Sarah said finally, making the decision that would change the course of the war. "And you'll have to prove yourselves. But if what you say is true, then we'll work together. For Earth." The room was silent as the gravity of her words settled over them. The alliance, forged in the heat of desperation, was their only hope. It was a dangerous gamble, but one they had to take. The tension between Sarah's team and the Zorax defectors was palpable. Every move, every word exchanged was scrutinized, as though the fragile alliance could shatter at any moment. But despite their reservations, Sarah knew that if they were to have any hope of winning this war, they needed to put aside mistrust, at least for now. Dr. Alvarez and Cal's faction worked together day and night to understand the inner workings of the Zorax fleet. They discovered something shocking. The Zorax had been studying Earth for centuries, waiting for the moment when their military technology could finally overpower humanity's defenses. But what the Zorax didn't account for, it seemed, was the unpredictable nature of humanity itself. Our ability to adapt, innovate, and fight back in the face of annihilation. "We have one chance," Dr. Alvarez said, his voice a mixture of excitement and fear as he looked over the maps of the Zorax's most important strongholds. "They underestimated us, but we have to act fast. If we don't strike soon, they'll deploy their planetary weapon." Sarah's heart tightened. The planetary weapon was what the Zorax had been building in secret, a device capable of wiping out all life on Earth in a single catastrophic strike. The clock was ticking, and every moment spent strategizing brought them closer to the end. The defectors, led by Kale, shared crucial information on the locations of Zorax energy cores, where their ships were powered and controlled. The Zorax had learned to harness energy from black holes, tapping into power so vast that it was nearly impossible to destroy without knowing the precise vulnerabilities. But Kel's team had infiltrated the Zorax ranks long enough to know where to strike, if they could get close enough. The plan was risky. Sarah and her team would need to infiltrate the Zorax flagship, an enormous, heavily fortified warship floating above the remnants of New York City. There, they would plant explosives at the core of the ship, disrupting the Zorax's control over their fleet and buying humanity the time it needed to mount a real resistance. "We have to make sure we strike before they activate the planetary weapon," Sarah said, her voice steady. "This is our only chance. Kale, are you sure your people can get us inside?" Kale nodded, his face etched with the weight of years spent hiding in the shadows of the Zorax war machine. "We've infiltrated their ranks. We know how to get you close. But you'll have to move quickly. Once you plant the explosives, there's no turning back." The weight of those words hung heavy in the air. The stakes couldn't be higher. If they failed, It would mean the end of humanity. But if they succeeded, they would have a shot at toppling the Zorax and reclaiming their planet. Sarah turned to her team, each face filled with determination. We do this together. We survive together. As the plan began to take shape, Sarah felt the enormity of what they were about to undertake. The odds were overwhelming, and there were no guarantees. But what she did know was this: humanity's will to survive was their greatest weapon. And for the first time since the invasion began, she felt a glimmer of hope. The silence in the underground command center was thick with anticipation. Sarah and her team were gathered around a large table, the flickering holographic display casting an eerie glow over their faces. The plan had been set in motion. Their target, the Zorax flagship hovering ominously above the ruins of New York. It was a fortress in the sky, its defenses unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Yet it was their only shot. "We know the layout of the ship," Dr. Alvarez said, his voice tense but focused. "Cal's group has given us access to a covert route inside. We'll be able to bypass most of the security systems, but once we're inside the core chamber, we'll be on our own." Sarah's fingers drummed lightly against the table. "We'll need to move fast. The Zorax's planetary weapon is counting down. Once it hits zero, Earth's fate is sealed." Her team exchanged uneasy glances. The plan, though meticulously crafted, was dangerous. There were no guarantees they would make it out alive. But they had no other choice. Sarah's resolve hardened as she looked around the room at the faces of her soldiers. They were ready. "Cal, what's the risk of detection once we're inside?" Sarah asked, her eyes meeting the defector leader's cold gaze. Cal's expression was unreadable. "The Zorax are paranoid. Their sensors will detect any attempt to tamper with the core, but if we plant the explosives in the right places, the disruption will be enough to shut down the ship's main power grid. We'll have a brief window before they can react. That's our only chance." It was a slim window, but it was a window nonetheless. Raynor, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. "And what about us? How do we get out once the mission is complete?" Cal's eyes flickered for a moment, then he shrugged. "Escape is complicated. You'll need to move quickly. There's a secondary extraction point outside the ship, but if you're discovered, there's no guarantee you'll make it. You'll need to act fast." Sarah nodded, steeling herself. There was no time to dwell on the risks. "We'll be ready. Once the charges are planted, we'll move as one. No one gets left behind." The plan was simple, but the dangers were vast. As the team prepared their gear, advanced explosives, cloaking devices, and the makeshift weapons they had managed to cobble together, Sarah's thoughts turned inward. She had always prided herself on being prepared for every outcome, but this time, the stakes were far higher than any mission she had ever undertaken. The weight of the responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. If they failed, Earth would fall, and everything they had fought for would be meaningless. Yet, as she looked around at the soldiers preparing to march into the heart of enemy territory, something stirred within her. It wasn't just duty or strategy driving them forward. It was the will to survive, to preserve what made them human: resilience, unity, and the fierce determination to never give up. She knew now that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its technology or firepower, it was its spirit. "All right, team," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "Let's bring this fight to them. We end this now." The soldiers nodded in unison, their faces a mix of fear and determination. It was the calm before the storm. They had no idea what awaited them inside the Zorax mothership, but one thing was clear: the fate of Earth was in their hands. The journey to the Zorax flagship began under the cover of darkness, as Sarah and her team made their way toward the heart of the alien fleet. They were cloaked, concealed by the alien technology that Cal's defectors had given them. The shuttle they traveled in was quiet, its engines humming low as it cut through the night sky, toward the massive silhouette of the Zorax mothership looming above the ruins of New York. The city, once the symbol of humanity's strength, was now a shell of its former self, ravaged and burned beyond recognition. The weight of the mission settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders as she stared out the shuttle window. She wasn't sure if it was the quiet, the smoke from the burning cities, or the ominous ship ahead of them, but she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This was it, the pivotal moment where everything would either change or come to an end. Everyone ready. Sarah's voice cut through the silence of the shuttle, pulling her team's attention away from the looming target ahead. Raynor gave a firm nod, his grip tight around the weapon at his side. "We're as ready as we'll ever be." Cale, sitting across from them, his eyes steely and unreadable, broke his silence. "The internal security systems are malfunctioning, but that doesn't mean they won't detect us. Once we breach the outer defenses, we'll have approximately 5 minutes before the Zorax realize what's happening." Sarah nodded. 5 minutes. We move fast, and we stick to the plan. No delays, no second chances. The shuttle glided into position just outside the Zorax mothership's vast docking bay. A heavy silence fell over the group as the doors to the bay slowly opened, revealing the monstrous vessel's interior. An alien landscape of cold metal, glowing green energy conduits, and towering walls that seemed to stretch forever. It was a place where death seemed to hover at every corner. With military precision, Sarah and her team disembarked, slipping quietly into the shadows of the ship's docking bay. The cloaking devices allowed them to remain undetected by the ship's surveillance systems, but that advantage would only last for a short while. Their target was deep within the ship, at the core chamber, where the Zorax maintained control of their fleet's power and communication. They had to reach it before they were caught. "Stay close," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "We'll move through the maintenance tunnels. Once we're inside the core chamber, we plant the explosives and get out. No heroics. Stick to the plan." Raynor and the rest of the team nodded, their faces set in grim determination. The time for speeches had long passed. Now was the time for action. The group navigated the winding corridors of the ship, the hum of alien machinery surrounding them. It was an eerily quiet journey, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional hiss of steam escaping from pipes. Every corner felt like a potential ambush, and every dark alcove seemed to conceal hidden dangers. But they kept moving forward, trusting Cale's intelligence and the alien tech that allowed them to remain undetected. As they approached the entrance to the core chamber, the tension in the air thickened. The door was heavily guarded, and even with the cloaking devices, they knew it wouldn't take long for the Zorax to realize something was wrong. "On my signal, we breach," Sarah whispered, her hand on the explosive device she had prepared for the mission. It was now or never. The door to the core chamber loomed before them, a massive reinforced steel slab that could withstand even the most powerful of human explosives. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but her focus remained sharp. They were so close, and yet the danger was far from over. The faint hum of Zorax technology vibrated through the walls, as if the ship itself was alive, sensing their presence. "On my signal," Sarah repeated in a low, steady voice. She could feel the weight of her team's eyes on her, each one of them depending on her leadership to see them through this impossible mission. "We breach, plant the explosives, and get out. No matter what." Raynor checked his weapon one last time, then nodded. Cale, his expression unreadable, tapped the security pad that would initiate the door's unlocking mechanism. The countdown had already begun. They had minutes before the Zorax would detect any anomalies. Failure was not an option. 3, 2, 1, Sarah whispered. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the heart of the Zorax mothership. Inside, the chamber was a vast, cavernous space, filled with pulsing energy conduits and massive, glowing cores that radiated an eerie green light. The center of the room housed the Zorax's main power grid, a massive, unstable energy core that powered the entire fleet. It was their target, the key to disrupting the Zorax's control over their war machine. Sarah's team moved quickly, fanning out to their assigned positions. The cloaking devices worked flawlessly, keeping them invisible to the ship's sensors. They had only moments to plant the explosives in the most critical locations. "Cover me," Sarah ordered as she approached the central core. She could feel the intense heat radiating from the device, a tangible reminder of the destructive power it possessed. Every step closer felt like a countdown of its own. Tick, tick, tick. She planted the first explosive, securing it with precision, then quickly moved to the next. Raynor and the others followed suit, placing charges along the outer edges of the core, targeting its stabilizers. The Zorax had relied too heavily on their control of this energy source, and now it was their greatest weakness. "Charges are set," Kale reported in a hushed voice, his eyes scanning the room for any signs of movement. "We need to get out now." Just as the final charge was set, the room's lights flickered, and an alarm blared, a shrill mechanical sound that sent a ripple of dread through the team. The Zorax had detected something. The cloaking devices were no longer effective. "Move, now," Sarah shouted. The team sprinted toward the exit, but the heavy doors had already begun to seal. A massive metallic clang echoed through the chamber as the walls seemed to close in. Time was running out, and Sarah knew they needed to escape before the Zorax reacted fully to the breach. "Kale," Sarah shouted, her pulse racing. "Do you have a way out?" Kale's face tightened, and for the first time, there was uncertainty in his eyes. "There's a secondary exit, but the Zorax will be upon us before we can reach it." Sarah's mind raced. The countdown was ticking, the explosives were primed, and the Zorax were closing in. They had seconds to make it out, and only one shot to survive. "Hold the door," she ordered. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The doors to the core chamber slammed shut with an earth-shattering crash, and the room was plunged into near darkness, only the flickering glow of the Zorax energy core illuminating their desperate situation. The countdown was already running in Sarah's mind. The charges will detonate in 3 minutes. They had to get out, and fast. "Kale, the secondary exit," Sarah shouted, her voice tinged with urgency. Kale, once the calm leader of the Zorax defectors, now looked every bit as desperate as the humans beside him. "This way." He gestured toward a narrow, dark passage at the back of the room. But just as they began to move, the unmistakable sound of Zorax soldiers echoed down the hall. A large detachment was already closing in. "We won't make it," Raynor said, his eyes flicking to the exit and then back to the advancing soldiers. "They'll trap us before we even get there." Sarah's mind raced. There was no time for hesitation, no room for failure. The Zorax were relentless, their superior numbers and advanced technology all but ensuring a bloody battle if they didn't act immediately. "We'll fight our way out," Sarah decided, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Raynor, cover the rear. Kale, lead the way. Everyone else, with me. Move, now." They dashed toward the narrow passage, but the first Zorax soldiers emerged from the shadows. Clad in their sleek, armor-plated exoskeletons, they moved with terrifying precision. Their weapons powered up with a menacing hum, and they locked onto the humans with predatory intent. Raynor and Sarah opened fire simultaneously, the roar of gunfire cutting through the air as they sprayed rounds into the approaching enemy. But the Zorax soldiers barely flinched, their shields absorbing the majority of the impact. "We need more firepower," Sarah shouted. "We don't have time." Raynor yelled back, "Get to the exit." Kale, leading the group through the passage, turned briefly, his expression full of resolve. "This is our only shot. We're close. Keep moving." The team scrambled through the narrow tunnel, their hearts pounding, every second dragging on like an eternity. The sound of alien soldiers closing in was deafening now, the walls shaking with every step the Zorax took. Sarah felt the sting of panic threatening to break through, but she refused to let it take control. The charges were planted. The Zorax would not be allowed to finish their invasion. As they neared the exit, they found it blocked by a massive reinforced door, its surface glowing with alien symbols. Kel's fingers flew over a console embedded in the wall, but the Zorax were almost upon them. "It's not responding," Kel growled, frustration creeping into his voice. "Do whatever it takes," Sarah shouted. "We're not dying here." With a final, desperate effort, Kel pried open the panel and ripped out wires, bypassing the system in a last-ditch attempt to open the door. It was agonizingly slow. The sounds of the Zorax forces echoed closer. Sarah gripped her weapon tightly, ready to make her final stand. Then, with a loud hiss, the door slid open. "Go. Now," Sarah ordered, and without hesitation, they charged through the doorway, racing into the unknown. Behind them, the explosion of the Zorax core rocked the entire ship. A blinding light filled the tunnel as the shockwave hit, throwing the team off balance. The explosion had done its job. The Zorax flagship was crumbling. The fleet would fall with it. But their fight wasn't over. They still had to survive.